To start the webinar, and we'll start by let me introduce you to the Quality and Qualifications Ireland Chief Executive, Dr. Pádraig Walsh.
Thanks very much, Sue, and thanks to everybody for logging on today. I can see we're picking up numbers as we speak, like a rolling stone. Who would have thought 2-3 years ago that we'd be having National Academic Integrity Weeks, not seminars on things? And so today is the first day of our National Academic Integrity Week, the second year that it's taken place. And I'd obviously like to welcome you all to the webinar. And as you're no doubt aware, academic integrity is an important focus as it's an integral part of the quality assurance and qualification system. And when it is breached, issues and problems occur. It's great to see so many NAIN members taking part and hosting events on this year's programme. I hope many of you will have seen the QQI e-zine, the QT, the October edition, which has taken the theme of academic integrity this time in support of the NAI week. The work of the network over the last 18 months or so, since its inception, has been very impressive. I was reminded of this when I sit on the tertiary education steering group that's been overseeing, if you like, the national response at education and training level. Meets weekly. The Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science, Simon Harris, attends most of the meetings. And one of the things we were asked to do recently was to document, I suppose, the different learning that we've had from COVID, what has worked well, what has been a challenge, but also things that we'd like to carry through. And one of the things that in the QQI response that'll go out in the national published version was the importance of having set up it's essentially a provider and student owned and QQI administered or secretariat supported wise National Academic Integrity Network, and that this had been up and running in advance of the pandemic, set up in November 2019. So we were planning to look at this, but obviously no one anticipated the challenges that would come around from academic integrity in relation to assessments, in relation to remote teaching. So it was very helpful having had this established, and it's certainly one of the things that we highlighted as something that we would like to keep that going. And it has only been possible really because it has been provider owned and with an important across the whole private and public system, and with the assistance of student representatives as well. So on that note, I'm delighted to hand over to the NAIN chair, Billy Kelly, who will welcome our keynote speaker today, Thomas Lancaster of ICL. Billy.
Thank you very much, Pádraig. It's great to see so many colleagues and friends and fellow members of the National Academic Integrity Network here. My role here is to introduce our keynote speaker at today's National Academic Integrity Network webinar entitled Academic Integrity, the Student Partnership Approach. And Dr. Thomas Lancaster is a Senior Fellow Teaching Fellow in Computing at Imperial College London, with responsibility for student support. And Thomas has been one of the internationally important voices in raising awareness about academic integrity, plagiarism and contract cheating. Indeed, he can lay claim to the term contract cheating, first used in a publication of his as far back as 2006. His research in the field of academic integrity research has been hugely influential in the development of practices and policies in higher education institutions and among the wider academic community. He also developed the world's first academic integrity research module aimed at undergraduate students, now available as a module for students on programs across Imperial College London. Thomas's keynote presentation will examine how students can be directly involved in the academic integrity discussion and how they can be encouraged and supported to take active roles in future developments. Examples will be given considering how students can be involved in academic integrity decision-making processes, how students can champion academic integrity within their own institution and beyond, and how students can operate as research partners looking to address emerging academic integrity challenges. I'm delighted to give the floor to Dr. Thomas Lancaster for today's webinar. Thomas.
Thank you so much, Billy, and thank you everyone for joining me today. I think it's fantastic you all have a National Academic Integrity Week. This isn't yet consistent around the world, so Ireland really leading the way again here, as with so many of the legal initiatives we're seeing and talking about in other countries as well. So now you should hopefully be able to see my screen just to give me a bit of a prompt for the things we talk about as we go through this session, but you've really had some spoilers there about the kind of things I'm going to cover. But essentially, my idea here today is really to get you thinking about what kind of activities you can be involved with a student. And I think we're fortunate enough to have some students here as well. What kind of activities you can be involved with to perhaps take a leadership role in your institution or with your peers. So it's very much about that partnership approach, partnership between staff and students, partnership between students and other students, or perhaps even with the wider sector there. So you've heard a bit about me already, a computer scientist at Imperial College London. So essentially my background was initially very much from the technical side. I did my PhD looking at how to detect plagiarism. It's one of these problems that perhaps we don't think about really as a problem now, because it's something we've solved, and the kind of technology I was working on back in 2000 to 2003 today, we often think much more about how can we use that technology to support students to make sure they're not accidentally breaching academic integrity and not accidentally copying. So it's a slightly different problem as the way we've moved things across. But most of the time I work at Imperial College London, I tend to think of myself as working in, well, student support is my main role within the Department of Computing. And I like to use the term academic integrity enthusiast, because I'm here today really because I want everyone to think about integrity across the educational system. And by all means, feel free to tweet or to contact me or to share things that you find interesting about today's session, along with QQI tweets as well at Dr. Lancaster. So let's just take a pause, or as the slide says, let's stop. And one thing I was asked really to bring into the conversation very early on today is what we think about when we use the words like academic integrity. And quite often, these are the type of things that are very heavily involved in the discussion, and I'm sure you can add many more to these. And I can't see the chat. If I could, then no doubt we could have a discussion about what terms, but we tend to think in this very red stop sign quite often about what can we do to ensure integrity. I mentioned my background is very much about technology, and I'm still a computer scientist. I'm still interested in technology as well, but technology is not necessarily a solution to integrity for that. And we talk so much about the processes and procedures. What happens in a misconduct investigation? How do we make sure we get a fair process or get the result that is appropriate? We think about how we're going to write assessments to try and guarantee integrity. We think about the academic misconduct statements that go on the front of the assignment brief there. There's no end of discussion about laws, particularly in terms of contract cheating at the moment. Can we make this illegal? And as I mentioned earlier on, I think it's excellent work that's happened in Ireland. We've heard about similar developments in England recently, hopefully following across the rest of the UK. But I've never particularly myself been pushing the legal agenda, partly because there are so many nuances in law that I would never want to get into, and other people are better placed around it. But also because this is just one of many possible ways of helping to ensure academic integrity. We talk so much about monitoring. So I am here Speaking to you, I've got the camera trained at me. Quite often we say about integrity being a student doing an online exam and a camera is trained back at them, which immediately changes how you think and how you react in that kind of situation, because you are being monitored. And of course, we're used to that in our day-to-day life, but in an educational system, it feels slightly different. And I guess I put the word blame there because ultimately, when things go wrong, when there's a problem, we look at who we want to blame as part of this process. And if we're not careful, we end up blaming the students. Sometimes we end up blaming the people who are teaching them, and teaching is never going to be an easy profession, no matter what we try and do, because everyone comes in with different knowledge, different experience, different cultural backgrounds that we try and work around, even when people are grown up in a very similar environment, and their home life can be very different and the pressures upon them can be very different. So I put the word students, though, on this slide, not as people who we want to blame. We want people to take responsibility, of course, but as people we want to be at the very heart of the discussion surrounding academic integrity. And I'd like us to be able to take the next half hour or so, and then the time after that for questions, to think about what can we do to bring students to the very heart of the academic integrity discussion. So think for a minute about your own institutional environment. What role do students have to play as part of the wider community surrounding academic integrity? What kind of conversations do you have with your students directly? Is it something that happens at the very start of the year, the very start of the course, which says, this is plagiarism, this is what you shouldn't do, this is how you reference? And ask you the question straight away, is that really what academic integrity means to you or means to your students there? So how do we have students actively involved in our conversation? And the other words I just need to mention here are academic integrity. What does this term actually mean? And I must say, I am teaching an academic integrity module with students that we mentioned right at the start of the conversation. We're currently in just at the start of the second week of this, although we had a bit of a sneak preview at the start of term. I'll talk more about that a bit later on. I'm having my first live online meeting with the students later today, and over the weekend I looked at some early reflective work the students had done, talking about what academic integrity means to them and means to their subject. And so much of the discussion that they pinpointed they'd had prior to this module was about exactly what I just said, about not plagiarizing, not cheating an exam, to use another term which has a lot of emotion behind it as well there. But the ideas I introduced very early on is that there is actually definitions of academic integrity, that it's not quite the same as saying we're teaching ethics. There were things that were just not widely considered. Now, I'm teaching a very self-selective module that the students at Imperial have to choose to do a module of this type. They're in that they have to do a module outside their main curriculum area, but to choose the option as opposed to all the really interesting looking modules on business, entrepreneurship, learning languages, the secrets of maths, whatever it might be about academic integrity, then you have to be self-selecting in some way to put that at the top of your choice list and want to do that. So this isn't necessarily something I think I could roll out automatically to everyone, but there is a core of students, I believe, at every institution in the world who feel very passionately about this area. So what then is academic integrity? There are all kinds of different definitions you can find, particularly in the positive way of dealing with things. This is the one from your very own National Academic Integrity Network, the lexicon of common terms there. And I'll let you read that on the slides. Compliance with ethical and professional principles, standards, practices, and consistent systems of values that serves as guidance for making decisions and taking actions in education, research, and scholarship. So think about all the different stakeholders that are involved with that conversation. Everyone involved in the educational system, ranging from the government policymakers to the upper levels of universities, the people who are determining what institutional policy is, what teaching and learning policy is, what should be included in our curriculums, through to the staff who are teaching, through to the people who are supporting the teaching process, through to our professional services staff, our librarians who are guiding students, the student unions, the students themselves, the researchers, and I'm sure you can come up with a long list of other people who have such an important role to play in education. Even the people at pre-university level and in the home who guide our students in the decisions that they make there. But the word ethics is in here, the practices, the principles, the consistency, the values there, and the link perhaps with research integrity as part of this whole process. But I think that's a really great definition that you've got to work from about academic integrity as part of the meta level for the very much the whole sector. I'll also throw out a separate definition, just one more. You can find many more here from the International Center for Academic Integrity, essentially a US or North American based organization. They're the people who are organizing the International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating. It takes place on Wednesday of this week. But I mean, they have much more guidance than this, but the sentence that I picked up on from their site, the commitment from students, faculty and staff to demonstrate honest moral behavior in their academic lives. And they have 6 principal values as well, which do include honesty in there. But again, it's bringing out the idea that it is that students have a role themselves, but it is more than just the students, it's everybody involved in the academic and educational system who is guiding things. And that's why I think the student role needs to be very much extended from students being passive receivers of information, students following the decisions that are made by other people on their behalf, to being actively involved in guiding university strategy, to determining the content of the curriculum, to thinking about the assessment, which is so important to them as well, and being involved perhaps with the decision-making process. And I'd like to really go back to something I was involved with 11 years ago at Birmingham City University, where I spent many years of my life working a couple of more management related jobs, and then pre-returning to teaching related position at Imperial College London. Very much Birmingham City University, a city centre university in the second city in the UK, about as far away from water as you can possibly get within the United Kingdom. Very much primarily drawing a local student intake there, and also home to the first scheme called Student Academic Partners that I know about operating in that format, certainly in the UK and possibly anywhere in the world. And there have been a lot of publications about this since, but I got involved with this in the very first year it operated, running a summer project shared, working in partnership with a student, not a student working for me, but a collaboration designed to do something useful and to use the skills of both the staff partner and the student partner there. And this is from a publication that was released at the time. And if I was to look inside the publication, there are a couple of pages about work I did with Alexander Saiken, about essentially just using his skills as a computer scientist to just develop videos and training materials for students wanting to do online surveys using open source software there. And we talked a bit about our experiences working together and developing this in the printed documentation that goes alongside this. But really, it's bringing in Alex's skills as a computer scientist, but also a multimedia specialist, to do something useful for students. Now, it's not perhaps something we would repeat today because there are lots of free tools for running surveys that you can just tap into. But at the time, when we had project students who were not wanting to spend money and wanting to not use bits of paper and all the dangers that may have to conduct surveys, it was something we decided was quite useful. And just pick up on a couple of things that that Alex said in that feedback, which is on the page here, there, which I think still resonate about what a staff-student partnership is today. That that I left Alex with the liberty to guide the project as he saw fit. I mean, essentially, we would meet together and we would discuss things, and I would rely on Alex's skills as a student, as somebody who had spent a lot more time video editing and developing than I had, and using these bits of software. And Alex also thought it was great to have got involved in a meaningful project, creating resources that actually be used. And indeed, I still teach a lot of professional issues, research methods and associated areas. And these were things I shared with subsequent students, and they made use of, and they set up their own survey software. So this is slightly a computer science example, but it could be used elsewhere. And I did check out what Alex was doing while I was preparing this, and he is very much still working as a freelance multimedia developer and artist, and he is available for work. I was quite pleased to find out he'd developed the artwork for an app I use regularly. So our students are very talented and can do on great things when they are no longer a student. They can also do great things for us at the same time while they are a student as well. So these are the kind of things you have to think about. We have a fantastic student intake who can support us with academic work and academic integrity work. And I fast forward 10 years to work at Imperial College London with the Student Shapers scheme going on at the Imperial, which essentially is, I'm not going to say this is plagiarized from the Student Academic Partners scheme at my previous institution. There, I would say it is a natural successor of a type of scheme which has moved quite widely across the sector now, but continually powerful area. And so last summer, Codrin, who you can see there, worked with me on a separate project. We were looking at multiple things, not strictly solely related to academic integrity. We were also doing some work about teaching of certain subjects as well, but we had some time left at the end of that summer project to do some investigation about the pandemic and some of the challenges towards academic integrity that we'd seen at the time. And you just see some of the results. We published a paper in the International Journal for Educational Integrity, which was co-authored, looking at possibly a bane to all of our lives, the use of Chegg, the site for sharing homework answers, allowing people to get answers back during the course of an exam, and noted essentially what may be quite an unsurprising result, that when students have moved away from an environment where they feel all the support is there, they can knock on somebody's door and they quickly move to being unsupervised, and they find the sites offering support online, like the one we looked at in this paper, then they can feel drawn to use them, even if that is not what we would consider academic integrity. And Codrin has, I've been quite involved with media work with this. Codrin's not been quite so keen to be involved with media work, but he has had offers to do this as well. But this has been mentioned in the House of Commons in the UK, and continues to be mentioned in newspapers and the media as the unfortunately quite negative side of this there, but also our opportunities to make changes to how we conduct education as a result of our experiences during the very unfortunate situation of the pandemic. So once again, a student partner who's been able to work with me on what I would consider a very useful research project, but also a research project that is incredibly accessible to our students as well there, and to find something out that is new and novel, and to have something very valuable for his CV. He's still presenting this as well in other ways for this there. And I'm not necessarily picking out to say that either student I've just mentioned in examples is the best student in their cohort. there or anything like that. They were both are very good students, but at Imperial we get many very good students. That is one of the interesting things. We get many other challenges as a result from that as well there, but we can use our student skills and we can trust them to get involved, whether it's in research projects, whether it's in raising awareness of academic integrity, whether it's helping to guide our processes. This is Mary Davis from Oxford Brookes University in the UK. Earlier this year at the European Conference, Academic Integrity and Plagiarism, Mary spoke about some work she'd been involved with in her own institution. This is just one thing that she spoke about. One of the advantages now with this all being able to have conferences online is it's so much easier to share some of these results. But Mary talked about how important it was to conduct research at your own institution and to find out about your particular student intakes, the challenges they have surrounding academic integrity or possibly academic misconduct. And Mary found certain groups of students, particularly to do with ethnic minorities or people with a specific learning disorder, or from the wine and participation background, which in the UK we would say were people who would not traditionally go to university. They may be the first student in their family to go to university there, who were being disproportionately referred for academic misconduct investigations. And we need to know more about our students because we can only support them if we know about which people are struggling. We think about what interventions we can put into place for each different type of student. And I'm not saying your data for your own institution, which I hope you have, I'm not saying your data will look exactly like this, but is there anything you can do to find out if there is support you can put into place for particular groups, or even going one step beyond this powerful work, can you have student partners and student champions who can help you with this work and who can help as peer mentors or can develop this guidance to go alongside it? So I've said we need to understand our students, but going alongside that, we need to know what our students understand as well. And another conference, I didn't attend this one, so I'll just pick it up on a tweet that I saw, but you may have seen a similar result in other situations. It's not completely unknown. This is just nice and timely here from AJ Hyman. Research shows that students and institutions differ in their understanding of academic integrity, where students often emphasize intent and contextual circumstances there. And I'm going to pick up on this word intent. It's something I find very difficult if I'm involved as part of a panel discussing potential academic misconduct, because it is very hard to determine if, let's say, plagiarized work in a written document was plagiarized intentionally or was plagiarized because a student didn't understand how to write and reference. And let's just draw a line between the idea that we've taught students how to reference, or we've shown them referencing, and they understand how to reference, and they understand why it's important and why showing that you value other people's ideas and opinions is so essential for academic integrity reasons there. So the students are saying they don't necessarily think that intent is so much part of a conversation. How do we have that conversation with them to help them? They're also bringing up the importance of context. And I think this goes back to things that I've already mentioned during this keynote, that we need to know about the background of our students. We need to know what has brought them to this stage of academic life, what they've been taught or led to believe prior to this point there, but also what's going on with the students at the moment. What has led them to this point? What kind of stress and pressure are they under? How are they coping with a pandemic? So many areas for us to think about as well, and to have that conversation with our wider student body about. Because let's face it, if you are called in for any type of academic misconduct investigation, it is not a pleasant experience to be involved with as a student. It's not always a pleasant experience to be involved with as a member of staff either. I've certainly found many cases where there are students I think highly of who ended up in this situation there, or I perhaps know about things that are going on in a student's life that can't be taken directly into account, and it can become quite unpleasant to try and make an impartial judgment in those situations. I'm sure many of us have been in that situation, but there's research here that has come from Deakin University in Australia. The great team of people working on academic integrity type research, they're looking at what happens when students go through contract cheating investigations. I suspect the same is true of many types of academic misconduct investigations, and just a few of the highlights that they spoke to students. And the students said, perhaps unsurprisingly, it was challenging, it was stressful there. They felt they're in a damaged relationship with their academics, that they would be judged harshly in the future precisely because they'd been called up about an academic misconduct investigation there. They felt this would stay on their record as well. And the students often said they would not tell their families about the situation. They didn't have the support network at their home. If there was a financial cost to this, and it's quite rare, I think, in the UK system, I think the same in the Irish system, that we fine students for academic misconduct, but there are indirect costs in terms of the costs of retaking or the costs of staying an additional year or not earning. They would try and bear those costs on their own and not want their families to know. It's a whole shameful situation. So what kind of support do we have in place for our students who end up in this situation? And this is before we have determined that students, that a case of academic misconduct is proven. This is just the pressure of going through this this investigation, the waiting, the not knowing that they have to deal with there. And can our students themselves be involved in that support process? I will throw out one very positive finding from that study. There weren't too many positive findings, apart from that we need to change, but some of the students who had been in these interviews and spoken to the researchers did feel after this process that they knew what was involved. They could emphasize with other students in a similar situation, and they were very much ready to take on peer mentoring roles, to take on student guidance roles, to champion academic integrity. So that can be a very positive outcome from going through an investigation like this. And there can be students who do take ownership of the situation, but they're also ready to help other students, perhaps to ensure they don't go through this situation, this investigation, or if they do, perhaps there is some independent guidance from staff, because it's who gives this guidance is going to be one of these considerations we have to make. Things, of course, do go wrong, and there are lots of good examples now around the sector of how we can hold panel investigations. This is just taken from the guidance at the University of Sussex in the UK, but there are many other examples now where academic misconduct panels have student representatives on them, helping to make the decision and to feed into the conversation as well. In this particular case, a student union representative on the panel there. Sometimes it could be a trusted student or a student champion. So it isn't just people completely disconnected from the students who are making the decisions about such a crucial area about guilt or innocence. It is students themselves there. And there are different models that you can look up, but if you're one of the institutions that's reviewing your academic misconduct procedures, is this something you can do for yourself there? Do you maybe already do this? We often have students receiving guidance from a student union or equivalent organization, but can we get these people actually involved in the decision-making process as well? Because this helps us to show that the process is fair and consistent, and it's not being conducted behind essentially completely closed doors either there. So what can we do to improve that process? Our students can tell us such a lot about academic integrity, about their experiences, and they can share things. I've already gone through some examples of this, but here is a webinar which was run by the International Centre for Academic Integrity about 2 weeks ago now. There are There are so many opportunities now, as mentioned earlier, to join activities happening online. This was partly to promote the International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating coming up on Wednesday, part of your Academic Integrity Week in Ireland as well. But the webinar had a student group of people, the participants you can see on the screen from all around the world: Canada, Greece, the UK, the United Arab Emirates, Mexico, all bringing together their own experiences and answering questions there as well. And just one of them I found really interesting about the use of services like Chegg and Course Hero, and what do students themselves think about this? Just because, of course, I mentioned that we've conducted research, that Conrad and I have been working on this area too for that. But students, you often find, have very strong opinions about these areas, but they also have empathy with other students and understand a bit about why you're getting into this situation. So can you have student focus groups or student panels in your institution sharing their own experiences for this as well? And can this tie in with the other work going on around the world? Because there are so many opportunities now to get involved because we are so connected, which is a very good thing in many situations, apart from the downside when you're very easily connected with people who may want to help you to breach academic integrity, as can happen as well there. But we have our students involved with that. I've mentioned student unions many times as well, because student unions, of course, have a direct connection with students. They also have an interest in making sure students don't breach academic integrity for themselves, and have a great leadership role as part of this. Here's an example from the European Conference on Academic Integrity and Plagiarism earlier in the year, which was shared by Maynooth as well, about some of the activities they've done, some of the videos they produced, the social media graphics, trying to engage students as well, and as they've said, to get involved there. And there's so many other examples going on around the world that you can pick up with this. So many places, so many things going on on Wednesday surrounding the International Day of Action as well. But how far is your local student union going? Do you know what activities they're involved with? And how far are they connected to other student unions? So in the UK, very much student-led and student union-led. We have the Academic Integrity Collective. They've got their own hashtag on social media, Better by You, encouraging people to do their own work. And you can see many of the student unions who have signed up as part of that. And they've been doing fantastic work, really promoting the positive messages about academic integrity, talking about the idea of banning essay mills as well, promoting the idea that you learn by doing your own work as well, which is so valuable, and our students coming together to help the sector to strive. It's about this all community type approach once again. So can we feed in also the international work in this area? We did run an International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating last year as well, completely online in almost everywhere because of the pandemic. We ran 20 hours of live broadcasts from institutions around the world, countries around the world. And again, we managed to get, quite fortunately, many students involved with that. The videos are all up on YouTube. They haven't all been viewed as much as I would like, although, of course, they were viewed live at the time as well. And we had a student committee helping to organize the event too, speaking in many different languages, talking about their experiences, talking about why integrity was important for them. So again, there are all these resources you can tie into, many of them already developed by students that are out there. We've got our student saying there, ask for help whenever you need it, the advice to other students, but do it in a way when you can be taught on how to use the tools. Because one thing I found quite fascinating with this group is they talked so much of the words they use, toxic tutors, that so often people are advertising themselves as being a tutor, providing support, but if you go and you meet them, then really they're doing the work for you. They're not a tutor, they are a contract cheating provider by another name. So let's use our students, let's get them involved, let's provide them with that support as our partners. And I guess my final example, I could give you many more, but we will also think of some questions for this. I mentioned the research module that I've been running. I ran it last year, running it for the second time. This year, we've largely just started. The students on the screen are people who've been involved in research projects with me. You've seen Codra in there, who I've already mentioned. Rahul and Ben, who gave presentations with me at the European Conference for Academic Integrity and Plagiarism. Marcus, who's presented with me at an Advanced HE conference there. Chloe, who's done some great work looking at academic integrity policies across the UK that are working to publish, and indeed hoping to publish something with all of the students, but at least we've got the research out there. But these are people who've worked with me outside of the module. But one thing I was really pleased to do was to get the students into my module to talk about how to get involved with the international community, how to get involved with research. What are the challenges of doing research as an undergraduate student? Because it's quite unusual undertaking, but our students are very capable of doing it there. And then what kind of new methods can we use to let's say, to teach the principles behind academic integrity, or to help students to explore and learn these concepts for themselves? And I gave a whole presentation about the module design at the ICAI conference earlier this year as well. And there's a video version of that on YouTube if anybody would like to watch it. But one of the highlights for me was bringing in students I've worked with to speak, as well as some academics from around the sector, but also the students working on their own research projects. And one of the groups from that module is trying to publish their work as well. So in an area they wanted to work on research integrity. So there are many more opportunities to get students involved in a slightly non-traditional and non-conventional manner for that there. So I'd like to close this presentation by just encouraging you to think that academic integrity, regardless of how you're working about this, it is more than just plagiarism. It is more than just do not cheat. We have to give the tools to the students to understand that. We have to help them to develop an understanding of these concepts for themselves, but we also have to lead by example. And we have to think about how we teach with integrity, how we make sure our teaching is fit for purpose, that it's relevant for the students of today, that it's going to encourage them to want to succeed and do their best work there, because our students are our greatest partners, not only in academic integrity, but in the whole of the educational system. And I guess my challenge to you there is this word academic integrity champions. I've mentioned it. There are institutions that call their students or academic integrity champions. They sometimes call their staff academic integrity champions. But how do we make sure that our students have the skills to become academic integrity champions, that they have the opportunities to get involved with work in our institutions and beyond, and to help our other students to also succeed to the best of their ability, because the opportunities are out there for them. So thank you very much for joining me, and at this stage I will move over and quite happily take questions.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm now going to pass the leadership to Yvonne Kavanagh, who's going to chair this Q&A session.
Thanks, Billy, and thanks, Thomas. Thank you very much for a very informative and enlightening talk, and it's very timely for NAIN as we are progressing guidelines at the minute for managing academic misconduct cases, shall we say, and the student input would be very important there. It's amazing to see the many aspects to the part students can play in fostering and championing academic integrity. And I know there are questions in the chat, but I'd like to ask you a particular question first, if you don't mind. You speak a lot about undergrads and how they're involved in research. Have you any particular tips that you think would be useful for postgrads to involve them even before they join a HEI, because they come from national and international different HEIs from across the world and across nationally as well, and we're trying to have this common understanding. So have you any tips for dealing with the postgraduate students?
Yeah, brilliant question. I mean, I do talk primarily about undergraduates because that generally is the circle that I'm most involved with this work. And I have had I am involved with teaching on the master's courses and also senior tutor for our postgraduate courses, master's courses in computing as well, but there aren't necessarily the gaps to do this kind of work on a one-year intensive master's course. Although I have had students working on research projects from a slightly more technical side, which are not that interesting necessarily to share with people on this webinar, but there are certainly opportunities for students to do dissertations and project work related to academic integrity as well. Now, there are two areas really to pick up on, or several areas. One of them is academic integrity pre-university, regardless if you're going to an MSc or an MA level course, or even if you come into your first degree. What happens at school level? How can we support teachers to make sure that students are at least given an understanding of what academic integrity is before they arrive at university? Because our school pupils have been educated at home and have not necessarily had quite the same direct guidance, and they may have been exposed to sites like the one I mentioned in the talk where answers are available before going to university there. So what can we do in that situation? At master's level, I think some of this is about the guidance we give students before they arrive. Is there any self-supported study they can do to help bring them all up to speed on the same page? For many people, they're studying in English for the first time. If they're from an international community, it is so tough. I can't imagine going and studying in a foreign language and writing in that language in my own words, even with understanding ideas of referencing and everything to go alongside that, even now with the benefit of systems like Google Translate there. So really, really tough there. How can we make sure we present this course on academic integrity in a way that gives them the skills, but also is not just us lecturing them in the do not do this type way there, because this is the whole ethical area. And one thing I find useful with students, and I've done this on my module with undergraduate I've been talking about, is try and get them to relate the conversation to their own subject, because integrity and then the associated ethics does not look the same in every subject. The underlying principles, yes, they probably do, but there are specific challenges that differ from subject to subject. And I guess the final part of this is also just to think as well about our PhD students and our research students. And I don't really get so involved in research supervision anymore, but I do know, for instance, that Salim Razi in Turkey, he's run a module about academic integrity research aimed at PhD students. I think it's really the first module of its type. So, I mean, in the UK, we don't tend to really have this idea of you do this talk module alongside your PhD quite the same as they do in some countries, but there are opportunities there. And there are many great subjects available for investigation by PhD students, but so much, I think, of the conversation ends up being about research integrity at that level, but we sometimes miss academic integrity and the wider community as part of this as well.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for that. And I think the ENAI talk this morning hit a lot on what you just said there, especially from the Turkish aspect. And thank you for highlighting the work of Nain, and thanks to Sue Hackett for sharing the link in the chat. Now, just looking at the chat questions, I have a question here from Derry Murray. How can we enable international students to have a loud and clear voice in academic integrity policy and decision making in their institutions? Apologies. How can we enable just international students, in case you didn't hear it, to have a loud and clear voice in academic integrity policy and decision making within their institutions?
Yeah, great question. This, I think, comes back a bit to what I mentioned earlier about knowing who our students are, knowing what their background is, knowing what groups are at risk. And in many cases, it could well be the international students, because every so often you'd see, at least in the UK, the university league tables are the universities with the worst cheating. And I would never phrase it like that. Incidentally, I would say it's the university league tables where they are addressing academic integrity and academic misconduct, and so they have more recorded cases because they've done something about it. But so often you look at the numbers and they break it down, and international students are going to unduly represented in those statistics. So we know our international students need that support putting into place for the reason we slightly talked about earlier as well. But how do we make sure they have a voice? that we get them involved on our committees, that before they arrive at university, that we try and send them invites. We try and get them involved perhaps in the appropriate cultural groups, if possible, and to see how they can feed into the different discussions. It's sometimes quite hard to do this without feeling like you're singling particular people out, and that's always one of the challenges about that. And we encourage people to talk about this area if they are interested. We can't make everyone interested in academic integrity, no matter what we might want to do. It's just not possible. It's this area people's eyes gloss over when you talk about it. The same as you talk about ethics. People just they just don't care. You show your ethical in your actions, not in your words. That's the idea there. So yes, we give them the invitation. We try and make sure they're involved, but we can't force everyone. But hopefully, then students encourage other students to be involved.
Great, thanks for that. Thanks, Thomas. Another question here from Deirdre Sturch. Do you have any thoughts on what the HEIs can or should do at senior management or middle management level to ensure that a student partnership approach is not only the responsibility or the result of individual members of academic or support staff? How can a coherent whole of institution approach be achieved?
Getting a whole institutional approach towards anything is quite tough. Their academic integrity, no different to any other subject, really. I think you have to push to get this into teaching and learning strategy, to get the discussions about this going, perhaps have that push from the students themselves or from the student unions. I mean, Australia had this become very much part of the culture there. The academic integrity has to be addressed because they had the unfortunate situation of a scandal that the access to the contents of an essay mill site showing a lot of assignments being purchased by students, including international students in that case, which ended up all over the media. And so institutions then were in a position where they had to do something about it. But they're also in a position where a certain amount of funding came their way as a result, which always helps with this situation. And I would like us to find a way to do this without needing to have a scandal, because scandals are not great for obvious reasons. So it's trying to get this core of students interested and pushing this, the core of staff interested. But I mean, it is tough, but the more times you can get the word academic integrity spoken about, mentioned online, show that students are involved in this, try and get them in almost by the back door, as I've had to do sometimes, by getting the research projects running, by getting the open module running across the campus, then you're showing that this is considered to be important. It's something the institution should be striving towards as one of its core values.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think it's very important, as you say, to point out that we should be preempting, and you can see that QQI have taken a lead in that rather than responding to situations. So hopefully we don't get the situation that happened in Australia. But again, it would be great if we had the funding, as you say, to kind of exemplify what we can do here in Ireland through roles and through management and support. I have another question here then from Karina Maguire from QQI, and it's just asking, have you had much support from staff? And if so, what roles or responsibilities are the staff that are supporting? Managers, quality.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's a very good question. I'm thinking how to answer that in a tactful way. I think I have had great support from some staff, and I also know of some staff who don't necessarily feel that should be at the forefront of their own personal responsibilities. And I'm not necessarily thinking, particularly in my own institution, I'm thinking throughout my career here when I answer this question, that you'll have people who feel very passionate about this, but sometimes they can be passionate for the wrong reasons. They can be passionate about thinking about stopping cheating, which of course has some benefit. Because it has benefits for all our vast majority of honest and hardworking students, but it's not the only conversation we should be having, which I hope you've managed to pick up today during this discussion there. but it's very much based on individuals wanting to be involved, trying to build that core mass. So there's quite a few people now around the UK at different institutions who meet up online and talk about the issues and share knowledge and try and get these conversations going around the sector about what's happening surrounding academic integrity. There are some networks happening at individual institutions. They're not necessarily all involving students as fully as they could be, but we are trying there. And if students want to be involved and you speak to these networks, then you would be incredibly welcome to share your experience as well. But it's like that. You have to start and build. You can't just suddenly go to the top of the tower and have a fully formed solution there. So which kind of people are supporting? Yeah, we do have great people across the spectrum who are supporting in different cases, but it's not consistent, and so much of the work in this field is about individuals really trying to lead the way within their own institution or with their own student body.
That's great. Thanks so much, Thomas. Yes, I think we're very lucky here to have the National Academic Integrity Network led by Billy there, so that we can come together as a community of practice and bring forward the role of academic integrity within the institutions. And as you say, there's a lot of different roles. Everybody who is in the network can have different roles within their own institution, including students, professional staff, academics, whoever's interested, as you said. Yeah, so it's great that we have that. Thank you so much. I think we're just about on time. I'll hand back to Billy for any closing words. Thanks again.
Just by way of closure, Thomas, to thank you so much, right, okay, for an inspirational talk. You've given us much food for thought. My particular takeaway is the question you posed towards the end of how can we support students to help them become our academic integrity champions. And I think if we all take that away, right, okay, as a puzzle for us at institutional level, we will make significant progress, right, in changing the culture of academic integrity within our institutions. So again, thank you very much, right, okay, for this webinar. I'd draw participants' attention, right, okay, to other activities across the week in terms of our National Academic Integrity Week. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you everyone.